of Management Studies, IGNOU presents an audiobook on the course MMPC 003 Business Environment for MBA program. Presenting Block 4 International Business Environment, Unit 10 International Financial System, Part 1. After completing this unit, you should be able to explain how the international financial system works, identify the institutions responsible to stabilize and reconstruct the countries in need of such assistance, describe the roles and functions of Bretton Woods institutions, and distinguish between International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Introduction. The international financial system is an arrangement through which the financial flows are governed. This is a combination of financial systems of individual countries and monetary arrangements like European Monetary Union, the operations of organizations like the World Bank and the IMF, exchange rate systems followed by individual countries, and the role of USA as an anchor country. The present-day financial architecture of the world is complex given the level of global integration achieved between countries. Hence, policies of individual countries can cause problems for their trade partners. The major role of the international financial system is to maintain stability. Countries may run into difficulty due to paucity of foreign exchange and default on their payment obligations. This may affect the lenders and cause a ripple effect throughout the globe. Hence, a mechanism needs to be put in place to prevent such fluctuations through a system of providing the finances with the conditionality that appropriate policies would be pursued to correct the imbalances. The two world wars caused a lot of disruptions, and one of the major impacts was on the countries severely damaged by them. These countries had to depend on countries like USA for funds to reconstruct their economies. USA did help those countries, but need was felt for institutions which could supplement this and take the responsibility for problems which could be faced in the future. In 1944, the Bretton Woods Conference agreed to form the World Bank and IMF. Political conflicts led to economic conflicts during and after the wars. Protectionism led to reduction in world trade and also caused a slowdown of the world GDP. Exchange rates were floated or being pegged at caused a lot of disruptions. Hence, a need was felt for a coordinated arrangement where the member countries can only deviate when they faced a fundamental disequilibrium. Though the IMF has not given any definition of what they mean by fundamental disequilibrium, it can be construed as a situation where the outward payments continuously deviate from inward payments. To understand the international financial system, we need to start from the institutions entrusted with the task of maintaining its stability. The IMF and the World Bank will be discussed in the upcoming sections. International Monetary Fund or IMF. The IMF is an autonomous international organization of around 190 countries. Members subscribe to its quota, and in turn IMF provides assistance during the crisis of balance of payments. Further, technical assistance to help countries better manage their economy and training and policy advice is also part of IMF's responsibilities. The IMF came into existence on December 27, 1945, after the Articles of Agreement was adopted by the members during the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944. The mandate of IMF according to the Articles of Agreement establishing it are: Number 1. To promote cooperation among the members in monetary matters and provide a forum for discussions to maintain cordial relationships. Number 2. To smoothen the process so that international trade is fostered, employment levels increase, real incomes grow, and productive resources accumulate for the member countries. Number 3. To incentivize orderly exchange rate arrangements and its stability and see to it that the members don't indulge in competitive devaluation. Number 4. To help the member countries develop a system of payments to facilitate multilateral transactions and to remove restrictions on foreign exchange which hampers trade. Number 5. To become a vehicle through which members can get over difficult times in terms of payments problems by accessing its resources so that they don't have to resort to policies which are further damaging. And number 6. To lessen the trauma of the member countries by shortening the time and degree of disequilibrium in balance of payment. Functions. The IMF performs many functions which range from surveillance of member countries to advisory for mobilizing of external finance. These functions are: Number 1. IMF has the mandate and legal backing to monitor the economies of the member countries to check whether they conform to its objectives. Number 2. Major function of IMF is direct lending to member countries to get over temporary balance of payment difficulties and to see to it that they take corrective measures so that the disequilibrium adjusts smoothly. Number 3. Low-income countries are helped by IMF through linking them to external donor agencies and sources of funds. Along with World Bank, IMF helps such countries in their payments and development spheres. IMF is also involved with debt relief and high indebtedness of these countries. Number 4. IMF's constant monitoring of the members' economic well-being helps donors and financial markets to properly gauge the economies. This helps them get external funding. Number 5. The institution also serves as a forum for consultations and international coordination among member countries to prevent disorderly movements in exchange rates. Number 6. Supply additional international liquidity through issuing of special drawing rights, that is SDRs, if need is felt. SDRs are the unit of account in which the fund transacts with its member, but they are not a claim on the institution. SDRs can be exchanged for convertible currencies. Number 7. IMF also engages in training and capacity building of especially developing country members in areas of its expertise. This helps the member to avoid costly mistakes while formulating economic policies. And number 8. In order to serve its members in a better way, the fund undertakes research in areas where it normally advises. The research is disseminated through reports, working papers, journal articles, through electronic modes. It is also a major source of cross-country data on financial, monetary, and economic variables useful to its member governments, researchers, and business people. IMF's policies over the years. IMF's bailout role starts with the country in crisis approaching it. Mostly this happens when the countries are on the verge of defaulting on external obligations like imports or external debt servicing. IMF decides on the modalities of help, which majorly are soft loans proportional to the country's quota. The repayment schedule is decided on the basis of the liquidity condition of the country, so that they don't face any problems. In lieu of the help, the countries need to follow IMF conditionalities. Such conditionalities are mainly targeted towards bringing the country back to the growth path. Typically, they are policies to improve budgets, reduce inflation, privatization, liberalization, which are basically market-oriented policies. IMF cannot force the countries to follow the conditionalities, but can withhold further assistance or delay subsequent sanction of loans. One of the major criticisms against such policies has been that it ignored the ground realities in the crisis-hit countries. In many cases, including some countries in Latin America and Africa, such policies led to reduction in GDP growth due to inability of such countries to compete with now liberal imports. Further, the austerity measures to curtail government expenditure to improve budgets, along with increased taxes, added to the problems of recipient countries. A one-size-fits-all strategy was criticized by many experts. Many commentators claim that IMF policies not only caused economic malaise but led to major health disasters like Ebola outbreak in Africa, where debt repayment was emphasized over resulting lack of resources to fight such a health disaster. Most often, the recipient countries refused to follow the prescribed policies, leading IMF to threaten to cut them off from future aid. However, studies found that conditionalities had little impact on effectiveness of IMF programs. From a structuralist point of view, when one looks at IMF's dealings with recipient countries, interesting facts emerge. Countries close to US are less stringently dealt with. Countries receiving debt from other international organizations get preferential treatments while disbursing loans. Countries favorably looked at by UN agencies are especially the temporary members of Security Council. In many cases, the conditionalities were more severe in case of the highly affected country. Even when well-meant conditionalities sometimes led to adverse international reserve position and higher interest rates for the recipient countries. Many feel it is not the problem with conditionality alone, but lack of mechanisms to properly enforce them was also a problem area. IMF rarely succeeded in punishing the countries for not following its dictates. The change in IMF's assistance program has been dramatic in case of geographic coverage. For the first time, IMF was involved in bailing out European countries following the sovereign debt crisis. The major initiative was in Greece, where the bailout was to the tune of $375 billion over 8 years. The amount was larger than the normal proportion of bailout relative to membership subscription. The jury on IMF's effectiveness is still tilted towards negative. Some experts argue that, to be fair, no one knows without these policies what would have happened. Role of IMF's policies in helping East Asian countries to quickly recover from the crisis in 1997-98 was lauded. Further, the assistance provided to Brazil in 2002 was another IMF success story where the country could repay the debt before scheduled date. But austerity programs in Greece and Spain have led to 30% youth unemployment. Some cite Ireland as a success story for the bailout programs. IMF have added more strategies like flexible credit line and a precautionary and liquidity line to help countries in difficulties, but who otherwise don't qualify for assistance. Further, in order to tackle the criticisms leveled by developing countries, IMF have been proactive in helping them in achieving the Millennium Development Goals, that is MDGs. In view of some of the troubled countries seeking relief from other countries and not IMF, the fund has tried to improve on transparency and timeliness of the assistance. On leadership part though, it has still a lot to achieve as the MD has most of the times been from some European country and the other members, especially developing countries, are bitter about it. During the recent COVID crisis, IMF doubled the funds available for assistance through Rapid Financing Instrument and Rapid Credit Facility. A demand of almost 100 billion US dollars was construed. More than 100 countries have asked for relief. Till August 2020, almost 70 countries have been touched through 30 billion US dollar loans. Chile and Peru have been given assistance through flexible credit line. Poorest countries have been given grants to cover their payments in the interim period. The fund has also requested wealthy countries, including China, to resist from asking the poor countries to pay their debt obligations in this difficult year. Thus, the fund has come a long way from stringent conditionalities to a more flexible approach. Further, now it is trying to cater to the development needs of the poorest countries. The World Bank. This institution also came into being after the Bretton Woods Conference. The major role perceived for the institution was to rebuild the countries severely impacted by World War II. It functions like a development financial institution and an investment bank at the same time. After its operations in the war-ravaged countries, their conditions improved. The bank then shifted focus to the development needs of the poor countries. The funding source for the bank's operation is mainly capital markets. Issuing bonds and grants received from its members are its other sources of funding. Direct selling of bonds and notes to its member countries are also sometimes resorted to raise funds. Role of World Bank. Number 1. Assist countries to come out of indebtedness. Due to the two oil price shocks in 1980s, many developing countries were on the brink. The bank resorted to adjustment lending to restore economic growth in such countries. Later, focus shifted to poverty reduction and retuning the adjustment lending to achieve this objective. Number 2. Poverty reduction. This has become a thrust area for the bank and has led to major loans to poverty-afflicted countries over the years. The areas through which this was done are agricultural and rural development, AIDS, anti-corruption, debt relief, education and training, global monitoring, poverty, private sector development, mining, sustainable development, trade, transport, urban development, etc. Number 3. Country assistance. The mandate of the bank was to lend to clearly identified projects for intervention. It was soon realized that the countries targeted were not capable of identifying projects. Thus, the bank had to involve itself into policy reviews, advising on policy making, formulating projects to ask for assistance, etc. The country assistance has many steps, which are: Step 1. Country assistance strategy. The bank prepares lending and advisory services based on the selectivity framework and areas of comparative advantage targeted to country poverty reduction efforts. Step 2. Identification. Projects are identified that support strategies and that are financially, economically, socially, and environmentally sound. Development strategies are analyzed. Step 3. Preparation. The bank provides policy and project advice along with financial assistance. Clients conduct studies and prepare final project documentation. Step 4. Appraisal. The bank assesses the economic, technical, institutional, financial, environmental, and social aspects of the project. The project appraisal document and draft legal documents are prepared. Step 5. Negotiations and board approval. The bank and borrower agree on loan or credit agreement and the project is presented to the board for approval. Step 6. Implementation and supervision. The borrower implements the project. The bank ensures that the loan proceeds are used for the loan purposes with due regard for economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. Step 7. Implementation and completion. The implementation completion report is prepared to evaluate the performance of both the bank and the borrower. And step 8. Evaluation. The bank's Independent Operations Evaluation Department prepares an audit report and evaluates the project. Analysis is used for future projects. The fourth role is of provider of international public goods. The bank is looked upon to provide necessary advice regarding economic policy and risk involved in general in investing in certain countries. The public goods provided by the bank are strengthening the democratic processes, promoting partnership with the private sector, providing knowledge about and relevant to development, global environment, correcting market failures, rectification of information failures, elimination of drug trafficking, management of global capital flows, along with overcoming market imperfections and policy intervention in poor countries. And the last role is of knowledge bank. Given its expertise in a wide-ranging area, the bank is a repository of information which spans across countries and sectors. The bank needs research to decide its intervention strategy and to monitor the countries to identify early warning signs. Based on research, the bank can provide relevant advice to its member countries. The databases hosted by the bank can be used by academicians, policymakers, corporates, etc. for their relevant work. Doing business reports, World Integrated Trade Solutions are some of the very useful reports and databases used widely across the world. You were listening to the audiobook by the School of Management Studies IGNOU for MBA program. Course code MMPC 002 Human Resource Management. Course coordinator Professor Nayantara Padhi from School of Management Studies IGNOU. Voiceover by Harpreet Kaur. Edited by Jagbandhu Jana. Program assisted by Tarannum Jahan. Program produced by Dr. Manoj Kumar Singh. This program was brought to you by Electronic Media Production Center of Indira Gandhi National Open University.